SB111 audio check.
All right, go ahead.
Hello, 1 2 3 1 2 3.
I think we have one.
Okay, great. I will. I'll be using HTML. And I don't know if you can control this. Lately, they've been splitting the screen evenly between me and the computer. If you can make me smaller and the computer bigger. Okay, great.
When you'll be using your board, I'll need to show the board as well.
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, it's just like lately they've just been doing it half and half, and the computer is always more interesting to look at than me. So. Yeah.
Please make sure if you use the board, then type this template so that I can focus on the board as well.
Okay. All right. Cool. We can start. All right, today we'll do the last bit that's primarily review. We may not go the whole time today, but we'll see. So we'll start off talking about responsive web design generally. We'll talk about finding versus choosing breakpoints, and then we'll talk about sizing and layouts, and we'll do that specifically with regard to form elements, which point to a lot of what we'll be dealing with the rest of the semester in terms of interfaces and user controls. So, responsive web design. What are the three components of responsive web design? All right.
In a technical way, or?
Yes. Well, just responsive web design. Remember, we read that book last semester. There's a reading this week, or maybe it was last. I think it was the last week. Let's look. Expose everyone's ignorance. Marcoti's responsive web design article, a classic, which of course you read. It's not funny. I don't give quizzes, but I expect you to know the material. Okay? There are three components. You should hang your head in shame if you had class with me last semester and can't name one of them.
Media queries.
Thank you. That's number 3. Media queries, which we didn't talk about yet, but we will talk about today. What are the other two? I posted to Basecamp. an image that perfectly captures what we're about today. And for any students like, oh, why don't you use Blackboard? All my other classes use Blackboard. This is why I don't use Blackboard. Yeah, and that's a problem, right? Because that's what some developer somewhere said. Looks good to me, it's responsive. We can go to some university president or provost or CTO and say, yeah, Blackboard's totally good on mobile. No, it's not. That's shit. And somebody is making a lot of money over that. And at whose expense? Yours. Not only in terms of you're the poor sap that has to use this. Quick, what's the most important thing on this page? I mean, what is it? We got needs attention. We got alerts. We got what's new. Which one is most important? Who knows? Because it's just slopped up there. Why is this? This is from an iPhone. Why is this in 2 columns? Because somebody somewhere is lazy and stupid. They thought that this was okay. Right? And so when you miss something, it's because of some shoddy web design. So look at this and tell me what's another component of responsive web design. Fluid grids. Very good. Right, what do we mean by fluid grids? Do a grid-based design. In the old days, we'd say, oh, this is 960 pixels, right? Now, we say something like this is 80%. Okay, so we do all of our grids in percentage units so that they're fluid, so that they fill the available space on the page in a way that treats users with some kind of kindness, that does some kind of editorial move, right? When you are an interface designer, you have to make a lot of choices on the behalf of your users. Okay? Lazy designers, misinformed designers, people who think they're helping users will make a huge bunch of preferences and pages of advanced features and you can tweak it, but most people aren't going to go to that. You have to make decisions. You have to say, you know, alerts go up first and then I mean, this is crazy here. This is just poor information architecture. What's the difference between needs attention, alerts, what's new? I don't know. You sure can't tell from their interface, right? So we worry about grids, we worry about presenting things to users, and we worry about making editorial choices to say this is the most important thing on this page. Okay? What's the other part?
Flexible.
Thank you. Flexible images. And here I'm going to say media/controls. All right? In the old days, right, we'd have some page design and we'd have an image and we would use, you know, like the width attribute on the image tag and we would say that thing is 300 pixels wide. Now, we want to do this stuff as a matter of percentages. And we want to do that for not just images, so that they scale in and out to respect the page, right? Let me pull up a quick example here. Right? If you haven't found the responsive design mode in your... Oh, that looks like garbage. Come on. What's wrong? Make my own site look like garbage. I gotta figure out why that's doing that. All right. But the main point, we've got flexible images here. I don't like the new responsive design mode, but we have images that respond to the space and fill that thing up. But we want to do the same thing with form elements and controls, right? If we want somebody to compose something, that needs to fill it too. So we'll say flexible images, flexible video, but also flexible controls as well. That you don't specify some kind of hard value. That's especially a concern for input elements and text areas. So let's pick up where we left off on Wednesday, and let's just set a paragraph to talk about media queries and responsive design, and specifically, I'll just go to good old lipsum.com. I saw it on here. All right. All right. Sometimes we use lipsum text when we're doing design. Let's see. Portion, come on, what's going on? Why is this all selected? Ruining my life. Here we go. Lipsum.com. There we go. This is the better generator. All right. So this is Latin. It's from the work of Cicero. All right, again, we want to do good source formatting, so I'm going to use my editor to insert hard breaks. And we've got the whole paragraph here indented. And just so that we have some kind of container, let's use our main tag, and we'll use the content ID on here. /main. Like that. So if I fire up HTTP server in here, I can go to localhost 8080. What is going on? There we go. Okay, so here is my text, right? Reset style sheet applied. So we've got very tight text here and no line height. So let's talk about setting text. Okay? When we do responsive design, this is how we want to begin. For those of you who didn't take class with me last semester, I know you've got big, huge 5K widescreen displays where you like to work, and so you want to blow that thing up. But we want to do something like use Firefox's or Chrome's or Safari's responsive design mode, so that we can get an approximation of this thing at narrower screen widths. I know you can't see it, but right now this is at the smallest display size that Firefox will handle right now, which is 280 pixels wide. Okay? And we've got text that's loaded up like that. It still looks wrong to me. I don't know why it's making the text so large. Yeah, that looks right. Something's wonky with that tab. All right, that looks better. So, how do you set a paragraph of text for maximum readability? What's your starting points that you have to do in CSS? All right.
Establish a line height.
Okay, we need a line height, right? This text here is set solid, meaning that its line height is pretty much the same size as the text itself. How do we know that? Well, let's look at the CSS that we've loaded up on the page so far. All right? And actually, let's just look at our larger, uncompressed reset style sheet, right? We've set font size to 100%, which means we're going to use whatever's the base font size in the browser. We've set font to inherit, so whatever the default typeface is that the browser wants to use. But here's our line height, which I've set on HTML as 1. Okay, when it's unitless, that's like setting single spacing, and we're just going to use the same size as our text. All right, so let's set up some baseline styles in our CSS, right? And we want to set this as a base style, and what selector do we want to use to set our baseline typography? HTML, Ari. Why? Why is that the tag we want to use? Why? I mean, I'm setting a paragraph of text. Why not set the paragraph tag here?
So the whole page we have.
That's right, Rosa. And why does the whole page have it when we set these styles on HTML? If you have a rich uncle who dies, you're hoping for a big inheritance. Thank you, John. All right? All of our text properties, font family, font size, line height, color, all of these things are inherited in CSS, meaning that if we set them on the parent element for the entire page, all the elements on the page will inherit those properties, right? There's actually no text content directly in HTML itself. But if we set these here, we can do that. So we can do those things like setting a font size of, let's say, 18 pixels, which we'll divide by 16 to get our M unit of 1.125. That in there. And then we need to set a line height. What is the typographer's wisdom of how big a line height should be roughly, just as a starting place? It might be slightly bigger, it might be slightly smaller, but as a general rule,
120% font size.
yep, 120%. Which of course we can shorthand very quickly as 1.2M in this case. So if I reload this page now with this, there. Probably don't want to read a whole lot of this stuff. It's still pretty small. It's still pretty tight. But it gives us a foundation to work from. Okay? So we've got a base font size, a base line height. We can also do something like choose a font family. And let's make this all modern. And we'll choose Helvetica, Arial, and then finally a generic like sans serif. That. Boom. Okay. Everybody see that? How the heading 1 and the paragraph all getting these styles, so we don't want to repeat our font family or our font size for all those different selectors because that does what to our style sheet? Or doesn't let us do what? What's our favorite acronym for CSS? Keep it dry. And what's dry stand for? Don't repeat yourself. Thank you. Okay. Because if you repeat these styles, then when you want to make a change, you have to do all kinds of extra work. All right. So our next task, and again, we're skipping a lot of niceties, but just in order to get a baseline, right? This is okay on a fonts or on a phone screen. But what starts to happen?
You do padding?
Well, we could do padding. How do we know how much padding we want to do? I mean, before we get into padding and things like that, what's the problem with the readability of this page?
Font size?
Font size is small. What else is?
Line height?
Okay, well, line height, yeah, that might be starting to get a problem too, but what's the?
Alignment? Justify.
Somebody said line. What did you say, Moses? The line length?
Alignment.
Oh, the alignment. The alignment's okay. I mean, what's the issue is your eyeball doing when you get to the far edge of the screen? Yeah, has to go all the way back. All right? This makes text progressively harder to read. And what happens if you make your text hard to read?
You won't read it.
Yeah. How do you know this? Where's the number one source in your life of text that is almost impossible to read, and it's done that way for a reason? Contracts, right? Anybody ever sign up for a credit card before? Anybody ever get an annual privacy statement from a company before? If you looked at how the text is set there, they're fulfilling their legal obligation of giving you the information, but they present it to you in such a way that you'll never be able to read it, right? Compare that against how the type was set on the advertisement that caused you to sign up for that credit card in the first place, right? Could not be simpler, okay? So we're assuming that you're going to be setting text and interfaces and other designs that people are going to actually want to read. So if you do this to them, they're not going to read it. Okay? If this is your portfolio of your work and how brilliant you are, nobody's going to read that, right? So we've got to somehow get this under control in a way that will keep it readable across larger screen sizes. So what's the way that we do that? Right? We have 120% as our usual line height. What's the other sort of general rule of typography of how long a line should be? Say a little louder, Rosa. 100 is pretty big. If you go to something like the Typographer's Bible, like Bringhurst, Robert Bringhurst, Elements of Typographic Style, usually somewhere in the range of 45 to 65 characters, including spaces. All right? So how do you know where you've hit that? Well, you start to look at it. And then you can always take one of the longer lines, right? Like this one is a little bit long here. Let's just copy that whole thing. Then let's go to a text editor from a good home, paste that line in. And we'll see right here. Look, I'm pretty awesome today. 55 characters on that line. all right? Which sits, math majors, pretty equidistant between 45 and 65. All right, so I know that that is going to be about the upper limit for this particular setting of text. Now, who said padding, right? Padding, that's the other problem here, right? We wouldn't want to just release this into the wild. We want to increase some of the padding around there. So what we might do at our mobile scale is use this 1.2M on our line height and replicate that on either side. Let's do exactly that. Let's go and say, hey, HTML, we want your padding to be, actually we could just do 1.2M all the way around, because if we do 1.2M all the way around, we'll get a nice empty line of space at the top that matches our line height, right? So we're staying on a consistent baseline grid. And now we've pushed our text in from the outside box. So where we hit 120 pixels is going to change, or I'm sorry, when we're going to hit that line height. Nope, try it again, Carl. When we're going to hit that line length, that measure is going to be a little bit different, right? Let me paste this line in again. I think this is the same line. There we go, 55. All right? So assuming I've slaved over my text setting, I've chosen a font family that I really like, and I've chosen a font size that I really like, then at this point I now know where my first breakpoint is going to be, roughly. It's going to come at 462 pixels, because beyond that point, if we go larger than 462 pixels at this particular setting, our lines are going to start to get a little bit more difficult to read. Okay? That is how you choose breakpoints. You will run across well-meaning instructors and authors of tutorials who will tell you, oh, well, the latest iPhone is this wide, and this Android device is that wide, and a Kindle Fire is that wide, so those should be your breakpoints. We don't want to do that, because those are always moving targets. If you do this method, where you're deciding how large a particular content block is based on nothing but the content itself, then whatever the resolution is on the next iPhone or the next Android this or the next Samsung Explodo model this, whatever it is, your content is going to look great. It's going to look like you designed exactly for that screen, because you are being allegiant only to the content itself, not to any particular device. Right? So we're going to choose this 460 pixels. And that becomes our first media query. So how do we write media queries? At media. Okay, so we open with this at media keyword in CSS, followed by what? Nope, not yet. At media, what kind of media are we querying? Screen. Right? This is permissible. We could say at media print, but we're saying at media screen. Then what comes? Okay, but what comes before min width? A coordinating conjunction from English class. And, thank you. At media screen and, then in parentheses we're going to give this condition. Rose, I'm sorry, I'm stealing your moment and saying min width for all this time. Right? Min width. Not max width. We're saying min width. And why are we saying min width? Why do we query for minimum widths? The way I teach responsive design has two letters in front of it. MF. There's not a swear. That would be RWDMF. Put a comma in front of it. What does MF mean? Mobile first. So when you design things mobile first, you put all of your resets, you put all of your base styles right into the style sheet. No media queries around it, because these are the base mobile first styles. We do this for a number of reasons. One is it's generally going to lead to leaner code. If we did a bunch of max width media queries, like I said, okay, set the paragraph this big, this wide, but at a max width of 460 pixels, don't apply those. Then you've got no styles. So in the next media query, you have to rewrite all that stuff for your next max width, and then it falls apart and you've got to rewrite everything again. So it's anti-dry style sheets to use max width. So we're querying for min width, partially because we're good, smart, lazy people who don't want to write the same thing over and over again. But second, there is a huge, right, we read a little bit about this in the mobile first book, huge market of very cheap, not very well produced smartphones, tablets, right, those little weird $40 knockoffs that you see in a bin at Walgreens and things like that. They don't have the latest Google Chrome on them. They don't have the latest Firefox. They have some weird off-brand browser in it, which may not at all understand the media query syntax, right? So if we keep our base styles to a conservative set of 1998 properties, right? Padding, that's been there since the beginning. We can look at this. Let's look at the documentation, right? MDN, padding, hit me. All right, sets padding space on all sides of an element. Let's go down to our table that says support. Basic support, Chrome 1.0. Okay, it was there from day one. Microsoft Edge, Internet Explorer, it took till version 4.0, right? Have we all seen that, like, what do we want? Fast browsers, when do we want it?
No.
Oh, clearly I need to derail class to show a funny image then.
And there's like a space between.
It takes like 5 panels for Internet Explorer to say now.
Yeah, here we go. This is popular. And of course I'm gonna get like the, right, what are we? Browsers. What do we want? More speed. When do we want it? Right now. And then down here, browsers. Right. All right. So Internet Explorer, as always, a little late to the party. All right. Part of the reason, let's be kind. Part of the reason that Internet Explorer didn't have padding until 4.0 is that most browsers, like if we go back to the early Netscapes, most browsers did not have support at all for CSS until well into the late 90s, right? And if you remember, we didn't do it this semester, but last semester I walked through the history of XHTML, or HTML 3.2 and 2.0. Even those early versions of HTML didn't support loading CSS, right? So we can be a little bit kind to Internet Explorer here. But we can see that padding is well supported across browsers. And we certainly would expect that even some weird off-brand tablet that your grandma bought you from Walgreens is still going to be able to understand padding. Okay. All right. We can look at the mobile thing. This is funny. We've got question marks. Everybody supports it. Right. Provisionally, yes on Edge. Okay. So we build our media queries with minimum widths. We say, and when we say minimum width, what we're basically saying is we have all these base styles. We've set a line height. We've set a font family. We've done all these things. When we say and min width, we're saying now you can add all of these other properties on top of what you already know. Or we can make adjustments that'll say, and now we want to display the page this way or that way, however it happens to be, right? All right. So we can, at least for starters, specify our queries in pixels. It's usually a good idea to go back and rewrite those things as M units, right? Why write media queries in M units? Say it again. Different screens, and also if you do something like I do every day, right? We come in and I pull open our course site like this, right? I usually blow it up real big. What you're seeing here is pretty much just the mobile first styles when I blow it up that big. This is not a mobile sized screen by any stretch of the imagination, but everything is blown up to such a point that you want effectively the mobile layout, even if you're projecting it, because it turns out giant text, single column layout, all those things are really good and helpful for when you're in a situation where you're projecting things that you want somebody to read at a distance. Okay? Now, most browsers that are shipping now automatically exhibit this behavior. Even if you write your media queries in pixels, they will adapt and figure out what's happening and change the queries accordingly. But we don't ever want to leave anything to chance and be like, well, the browser will probably take care of it. Yeah, don't trust it. So we'll come back and write that as an M unit later. Okay, but for right now, we're going to actually step in and do something so that our little page here looks good once we hit this 460 point. So what's the next basic thing we've done? So far we've got a page that just expands and contracts like this. Right? And we've decided that at 460 pixels, or thereabouts, the line starts to break down. Now, how big is the text column at this point in a layout? Can we calculate it precisely? No, it's a computer. They're very, very loosey-goosey. It's like poetry. It's subjective. It's open interpret. Of course we can. Let's do it. Let's do the math. We have a column sitting in a viewport. Viewport is 460 pixels wide, minus what? What is the minus here? What space is not filled with text? The padding, right? And the padding is 1.2 times 18 pixels, right? Which is our new font size. That's our line height. What's 18 times 1.2? Math cadets? 21.6. Which we can round to 22 for convenience sake. So we can take 460, subtract 22 pixels from that, and we get what?
438.
438. So we've got a column width in this design where 438 pixels is the maximum width that we want our text area to be. Okay? So what we'll do is we'll go up even further here. Okay, we'll go up to something like 660 pixels. And what we can do is drop 438 and divide it by 660 pixels and figure out roughly what that percentage is. Okay, it's about 66%. So if we wanted to at this point, this is probably going to be too drastic, but we could refer to that ID content from where? On our main tag, right? And we could say width 66%. If I reload this page, now I've got something that should be a lot closer to what we were talking about before. A little less yet. As soon as fermentum at shows up on that same line, we know that, because that's the line I keep measuring. When we see that, we know we've hit our maximum line length. Okay? So as we back this thing up, we go from 456. See, I hate this thing because it, you know how I hate centered designs? This is one of the reasons why, because when you pull this thing open, it goes by 2 pixels, so I can't get my fine grain, bump it over. So there's 454, 456, 464, and now we have this jump. And because I calculated this with basically an arbitrary larger value, right? Of course, we're getting a smaller screen now that works like that. And importantly, we've got a situation here where we have largely a fluid grid, but I still have this padding that's set to 1.2M. So I'm still maintaining the same space in M's with this padding. But we can change that as well, right? We can take 22 pixels of padding and change that padding from an M unit to a percentage unit, right? And we could even do that right at 460. 460 divided, hold on, 22 divided by 460 is 478. That's right, well, let me copy from there. So again, I'll open up my HTML selector, and rather than specifying that padding value on the left, and on the right as an M, I'll specify it as a percentage unit of the viewport. So we'll do 22 pixels divided by 460 is equal to that. So let's just take the first couple of decimal points. Oops. move your decimal over by 2. So we've got 4.78% padding left and 4.78% padding right. So if I reload this once more, okay, there's my breakpoint right there, 458, 460. And you don't even see it because at the point that we calculated it, 460, our 1.2 M from our base units is basically 22 pixels. So here we can just take advantage of the additional space, and we actually might buy ourselves a little bit more time, though probably not. All right? So then we keep going up. And when we get to that point again where, let's look for it, there we go. So 716, 720, yeah, 716, 718 right there, 720. We're back to where that line is breaking at about 65 characters. Okay? This is the unsexy work of figuring out media query breakpoints, and we're doing it here just based on a single column of text. One of the things that we'll see this semester is that oftentimes we'll have major media queries, right? I think Scott Jill wrote about that in his book, where we'll have some major shift in layout where we go from a single column to a double column supporting to some crazy tricked out triple column of things. But then in between these breakpoints, we'll have little adjustments to, like, you know, a label that appears next to a search box instead of over it, right? So we'll have these minor media queries that kind of get mixed in between it. Okay? Clear so far? Questions?
Turn your microphone on.
Oh man, you're right. Oh no! Sorry, students at home. Hopefully the room mic caught it. Shoot. Only been doing this how long? That kind of day. Sorry, students at home. If you can't hear it, what do I say? Let's make it, well, no, let's not start over. Here's all the code. Okay, so quick, for the students at home. Okay, what we did so far, we set up our base styles. Okay, and we're not aiming for the moon here. These are very basic things. We set up a padding that matches our line height, which we calculated as being 120% of our base font size. Okay, in this case, that's 18. We set our font family. We did all of that on the HTML tag. Okay? And we did that because that gets inherited across the whole page. All right? Here's our responsive media. We didn't actually write those today. Those are just part of the starter style sheet. Then we opened up the window, and of course it's not going to look quite the same now because we've made some adjustments to it, but we looked for a place where we can, here if we go to 458, like right here is about the point at which this single column of text becomes too large to read if you pull it open any wider. So that's where our first breakpoint came in. Right? And you get that snapback. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. This design needs more help. It also needs more content, right? There's not a whole lot there. But of course, most people, unless they're in this class, are not going to sit there all day and play the accordion with their viewport, right? They're just going to open it on whatever device. And if this is how big your device happens to be, you're just going to read that. You're not going to be like, hey, you know, if only it were smaller, it would be a little bit wider, right? We want to make sure that this is comfortable to read at a smaller gauge. So if my little 66% experiment had failed, right? If we opened this up and it was like, you know what, that is just, those lines are way too short. We're only getting 2 or 3 words on a line, or we're getting, right? Let's pull that abomination back up. I mean, look at that. This is so pathetic. We got text bleeding over onto other things. We got lines broken in weird ways. Right? If you were designing this, let's forget about paragraphs for a second. If you were designing this interface, what would you do with the date? For mobile users. Say it louder. Put it at the top. Well, I'm talking about, we want to indicate that it's January 24th, 2017 at 8 p.m. Is that the only way possible in Western English-speaking world to indicate that particular date and time?
No.
No! What else could we do?
1/24/27.
Okay, so Vinny is saying we could just do 1/24/2017, right? Which is a particular American way of doing that. What's the ISO date representation? Anybody know?
24-1-17.
Nope. 2017-01-24, right? You have to go to Europe to see this. I'm not even sure if Canada does this that much. Okay? Most of the rest of the world does their dates like this, as ISO dates. Because mathematically, this sorts way better than our wacky putting the month first. Okay? We do that because that's what we say. We say January 24th. We don't say 2017, January 24, right? So we could do this. We could say Jan 24. We could even probably say, you know what? People probably know what year it is when they're logged into Basecamp. Right? Does that have to be there? I mean, great for archivals. Okay, so Vince, you would. Why?
It's good for future purposes.
Future, but does it, I mean, this is going to change every time somebody updates their, so it's a judgment call. I'm guessing that if you're logged into a system like Blackboard for a given semester, you're probably not wondering, oh, I wonder when in 2014 my professor updated this course that I'm taking now.
Sometimes some professors accidentally put that in. Like they have stuff from last semester.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. I stand corrected. I would still look for ways to shrink this, both in terms of the way that we represent the date, and we might even decide, you know what, for mobile users, they're probably in and out and they're not pondering the great mysteries, so let's just hide 2017 on smaller viewports. How could we do that? I'm kind of wanting to get derailed now. I think I'm probably just trying to avoid. If we wanted to mark up a date and have it be responsive, well, we'll hold on to that thought. Let's go back. I was reviewing what we did for the people at home, right? Okay. So we have this media query, 460 pixels. We've got padding left and right, and we've got a width of 66%, like that. Okay. All right. Should we talk about responsive dates? I want to do form elements today, but I kind of want to hit this other point because I want to talk about these little smaller adjustments here. Okay, let's do it. Because this will get us into some advanced HTML stuff too. So how do you mark up a date in HTML5? Actually, we want a different tag called time. Right? We get a nice piece of semantics in HTML from marking up time. The HTML time element represents either a time on a 24-hour clock or a precise date in the Gregorian calendar with optional time and time zone information. Okay? All right, so we get our usual stock group of global attributes on time, but we also get this special date time attribute inside of time. So this attribute indicates the time and date of the element and must be a valid date with an optional time string. All right, if the value cannot be parsed as a date with an optional time string, the element does not have an associated time stamp. Okay. This element is intended to be used for presenting dates and times in a machine-readable format. This can be helpful for user agents to offer any event scheduling for users' calendar. There's so much editing that needs to be done here. Okay? So the concert starts at 20, which is when? Yeah, 8 p.m. 24-hour time. You just add 12 when you get past lunch. All right? So here is a more fleshed out time tag where we have May 15th represented inside the time tag itself. But we've got this nice ISO date inside of the date time attribute. Okay? So let's take as our inspiration this image and January 24th, 2017 at 8 p.m. What would that, without worrying about time zones and things like that, what would that look like? January 24th, 2017 at 8 p.m. We'll just stick this in this random paragraph. Time. Okay. January 24th. 8 o'clock. Right? That's what we're representing here.
Would you not use like a military time of that? Would you call it 2000 or no?
Well, this is what's meant for our human readers, right? What we would do is, yes, we would absolutely use the date time attribute, and then we need to specify an ISO style date. So 2017, 01, 24, T, which means look out, here comes the time string. What time is 8 o'clock? 20 hours. All right? So we get that.
Sorry, would that be with the colon though, or without the colon? Like,
Let's double check the ISO date format.
with the
Colon. Okay? And again, if we go back up, let's never take an example at its word, right? There can be errors all over the place. Valid date with an optional time string. Let's see. This is going to take us right to the specification, which of course has some wacky table of contents that's not at all responsible. There we go. Okay. Dates and times, encode them according to a common subset of ISO 8601. All right, so that is the ISO, which is, what does ISO stand for? This is one of my funnest riddles in class. If you try to parse out ISO to figure out what it stands for, you will always come up empty. It's the International Organization for Standardization, which would be iOS, but because it's truly international, they opted for the acronym ISO, which is actually an abbreviation, because there is no language on Earth in which ISO accurately represents the name of the body in their language of choice, right? Organization, Standardization, International, OSI, that would be in French, I think, and Spanish, right? So they went with ISO because that doesn't favor any particular language. I think that's neat, okay? But ISO 8601 is the standard for date and times, okay? And here we get some examples of how these are encoded. Again, we're looking at the actual HTML specification here. All right, so we can encode things with a time zone, such as Z. What does Z stand for? Any ham radio operators in the audience?
is that like UTC time?
It is.
Okay.
In the old days, they called it Zulu time, okay? Which had nothing to do with any kind of populace. It just came from, we'd have to find the history out more. I should know this. I'm a licensed ham radio operator. That was what I did in the 7th grade. Get my amateur radio license, right? But they talk about Zulu time, which is also known as GMT. What does GMT stand for? Nope. Greenwich. It looks like Greenwich, but it's pronounced Greenwich because those wacky Brits always have to come up with cute, right? It's like the beer that looks like Smithwick's. Smithwick's. Okay, there you go. Time zones and beer names in class. Greenwich Mean Time, which comes, why is it called Greenwich Mean Time? Greenwich Meridian Time.
Because the line just passes through the city in
Right.
the UK.
The prime meridian, 0 degrees, goes right through Greenwich. Okay. Now we tend to favor UTC, which stands for what?
Universal time.
Yeah, Universal Time Coordinates. Okay. So, which is identical. It's equivalent to GMT. It's just rather than giving Greenwich all that free press, we just say Universal Time Coordinates, like that. Okay. Or we can specify a plus followed by some value that represents the time zone. What is the time zone for Chicago at this point in the year for Central Standard Time?
Negative 600.
Yep, it's minus 600. Once we hit, so it's minus 0600 right now. Once we hit, what is it, March something. Right before spring break, we get the time change. When we get to daylight Don't say the S. Daylight saving time. Daylight savings is some kind of fire sale. Daylight saving time. Okay? That's what? Spring forward, fall back. We lose an hour. Here's a fun fact. If you go to our course website and you look at the calendar and you choose View Page Source, I have time coordinates for all of our due dates. Okay? I'm not using the time tag in this case because everything is silent with the time. I've got my own data attribute called expires. But if you scroll far enough into the future of the semester, not week 8, there we go, week 9, minus 500. Okay, so I've encoded all of the time zones for due dates based on what time it is in Chicago. Okay, so we get minus 500. That's your fallback. That's your losing an hour, right? Why not? Why if UTC, if our offset is 600 right now, why wouldn't it stay 600 when we get the time change? Doesn't the whole world change? Nope. UTC maintains the same constant time all year round. There is no leap year. Now, every once in a while, if you read the nerdier parts of the internet, you'll find out about leap seconds, right? 2016 was an extra second long this year. Everybody know that? There was a leap second right at midnight. All right? Because occasionally, our precise time, which is set by what? What determines the time? Does anybody know this? Anybody configure a server before? Oh, man.
Are you talking about the corpus things?
Well, we have several atomic clocks around the country, but we have this outfit called NIST, time.nist.gov. No, it's not time.nist.gov.
That's the server for updating your time.
Right. Okay, they don't have a web server there. What is, let's go, NIST time. Time.gov, there you go. Okay, so NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards, they maintain a particular clock, and you usually, if you go into like the settings on your computer, right?
I always change mine to that one.
Yeah, like Apple defaults to its time servers. I don't even know where I'm looking for here. Where's that set?
Date and time.
Thank you. It's amazing how blind I get when I'm in front of a class, right? So, ooh, look, I'm using time.apple.com. I must have not set this. What I usually do is time.nist, right, which is one of the options usually, where you can write your own time.nist.gov. Watch it be wrong. Cancel. I don't want to do anything.
Right, I know it is.
Is it? All right. I know it's screwed up. So we have official timekeepers that we can sync up with, but all of them maintain UTC time. So it's our spring forward and fall back that jumps back and forth. Okay. Which is all well and good. But what does this actually get us? All right, we've got this date time thing. What can I actually do with this in terms of JavaScript and responsive design? Let's fire up our browser console. And jQuery. Find me the time element, the 0th one. And find me the date time attribute of that. Why didn't that work? Okay. Why is my attribute not working? I want an attribute off of that thing. Attribute is not a function? Come on, don't tell me that's been removed in 3. jQuery. Attributes. Gives it for the first element in a match set. So I'm overthinking my jQuery right now by doing the 0th time element. Where are we at? One more time with feeling. Here we go. Give me the attribute of date time. There we go. So we can pull out programmatically this date time string in JavaScript. And if I do date now in JavaScript, I will get a Unix timestamp. Do we know this way of representing time? All right. And
Seconds, isn't
what's
it?
that?
It's the number of seconds after a certain date.
Ordinarily it is. JavaScript is funny because it returns the number of milliseconds. Okay? If we go to the documentation for the JavaScript date object. Okay. Date objects are based on a time value that is the number of milliseconds since January 1, 1970, UTC, also known as the what? Unix heads? The Unix epoch. January 1, 1970, everybody woke up and like, yay, Unix. No, it was an arbitrary artificial time that was used to calculate the number of dates, right? So we can do all kinds of interesting things here, like create a new date from a date string. Okay, let's find out what a date string is. Okay, date with more than one argument. Date string, parsing of date strings. The string should be in a format recognized by the date parse method. Okay, so let's just, for the sheer curiosity of it, let's try to create, right, here's our new date. So I'm going to say my time is equal to new date, and specifically I'm going to get my date from my HTML. Look at that. What I did, I don't know why this projector is so dim, right? I did my time, and then I said in JavaScript, create me a new JavaScript date object. I used the new keyword followed by the date constructor, and I passed into the constructor this line of jQuery from above, where I say, go find my time element, grab the date time attribute, which returned this nice ISO date. And here below in JavaScript, now I'm saying I'm creating this variable called my time, creating a new JavaScript object using that. So now I have a programmatic JavaScript representation that is completely machine readable. Nobody in here seems half as interested in this as me, so I'm going to just let this die and do form elements for 20 minutes. But this would allow us to do things like write some JavaScript that responds to our media queries and does things like, hey, on mobile screens, display the date like that. And as the screen gets bigger, make it bigger. We could even do something in JavaScript like we'll build, I'm going to do this weekend. I need a nice weekend project. I'm going to do this and post it as an enrichment example where we can take JavaScript, we can process this nice date, which that time's, oh, that's Zulu time, right? So 2, is that right? Yes, because if we're minus 600, to get Zulu time we have to do plus 600, right? Yes, which if we take 20 plus 6, that's 26, which is 2 hours beyond midnight. So this is the correct Zulu time representation for 8 o'clock at night in Chicago. We can take this and we can generate ourselves a whole array of possible different date formats and tuck those things into our responsive design. I'm going to do this because I think that some of you either don't care or you don't follow what it is that I'm saying. This is awesome, right? Because again, let's talk about this in terms of semantics. If we start with a nice, generous, human-friendly representation like Jan 24, 8 o'clock p.m., right? We can write that directly in the HTML, or our web app can write that directly in the HTML. And that's going to work for pretty much everybody. But then we can start doing fancier stuff like actually parsing the date-time attribute. That's what this is, why this little piece of HTML is so powerful, right? If you tell somebody, hey, you want to grab a beer? Cool, let's meet at 2017-01-24 at T20. You're probably going to be showing up alone, right? But as unfriendly as that is to humans, that's exactly how JavaScript and other programmatic representations of dates and times want the date and time to be expressed. So we get the best of both worlds here. We get the actual palpable content of the time tag here, and we get the date-time format in a machine-friendly way there. And our JavaScript is so smart, it even figures out where we are on the planet, right? Because I did not put time zone information on here, and it automatically made the conversion for me into Zulu time or universal time coordinates. Okay? So once we know we have that and we can access it, we can do cool things. I'll post an enrichment exercise this weekend. Don't have anything better to do than write more JavaScript. Okay, so let's make a commit, shall we? I haven't been making any commits. All right. First, I'm going to just clear this time thing out. Make the commit without it. All right, so we can always do git status, find out what's been going on. Let me do a diff on this index.html. Okay, so I added this main ID content. I closed it out, and then here's my paragraph, which is broken weirdly on here, but it actually conforms OK to my source. So I can say git add index.html, added main ID content, and lorem ipsum paragraph. All right, do git status one more time. That leaves our CSS file, so I can do git diff screen.css. I can see that I added my base mobile first styles, and I added these responsive styles, and I'm getting these ugly red pluses, which means I've got extra unnecessary spaces at the bottom of my file, so I'm just going to go down here, delete those three. Right? Which might sound pedantic. I know I love to be very precise, but again, this diff output is what your commit is going to look like on GitHub. So when that potential employer or potential group that's going to hire you as an intern, they see like extra sloppy blank lines or whatever, it reflects poorly on you. So there's our nice clean diff. So I'm going to just say now, just git add everything, which is just our CSS file. Git commit -m, added basic, mobile first, styles, and first media query. Okay, cool. Push that up, and then back in the editor, let me put this time tag back in. And I'll just put it on its own line, even though it's not a block element. So I'll go back and create that extra thing with responsive dates. Okay? All right, form elements. So your project 1, you're supposed to write some kind of form that gets somebody to sign up for something. So how do we write that in HTML? What do we need at minimum? What's that? Well, I mean, just in terms of HTML, for creating a form, what do we need in HTML? The form tag. Open and close. And what attributes do we usually have on the form tag? Let's go to MDN HTML form. All right, form element represents a document section that contains interactive controls. Cool. All right, so we've got those basic. Okay, we've got accept character set, which we don't generally use. We have action, right? The URI of a program that processes the form information. Usually if we're just doing some interface mock-ups, or if we know we're going to handle things with JavaScript, we might do something like action and point at a URL fragment called null. Okay. Usually to remind ourselves that there's something else that we need to do here. But we want to, ordinarily we would have something fancy like, right, we'd have signup.py or something like that where we're hitting some script on the server. But for this purposes, we'll just leave this as null. Auto-capitalize, you heard my sermon about that a few days ago. I won't do it again. Auto-complete. Enc type, which stands for what? Ooh, don't say encryption. Encoding, right? We have 3 different general ways that a form's encoding can be marked up, right? By default, it does application/xww, every form URL encoded, which is the default value if the attribute is not specified. Okay. We have multi-part form data, which is the value used for an input element with the type of attribute set to file. Okay. Are you going to have people uploading files to sign up for your service? No, probably not. And then we can set it also to text plain. All right. Let's go ahead and just set it to the default value. Let's see what they do in their examples. I would set it to the common sense default. Yeah, they just leave it empty. We can leave it empty too. All right. But when you get to the point of dealing with file uploads, remember this multi-part form data are very weird and very bad things will happen to you because basically it will take whatever binary data somebody uploads, that image or that PDF, and we'll convert it into a URL encoded string, and all kinds of nightmarish things will happen. All right? And then finally, the other attribute that we need, method. 2 options here, right? Post or get. What's the difference between a post request and a get request, and when do we generally use one or the other? Zach?
Post modifies data and get retrieves it.
Yes. And where do those words post and get come from? So post, Zach's saying post generally tends to modify data. Get tends to retrieve data. That's not quite how these function, but where do the 2 words come from? Right? HTTP. When we open up a browser on a phone, on a desktop, or even if we use something like good old-fashioned wget, right? Have we looked at wget in here yet? Where I could do wget localhost 8080, just connection refused. Really?
What does wget do?
Maybe it wants just the straight up. Actually, let me use curl here. 127.0.0.1. 8080. There we go. Ooh, let me do it one more time with me in curl with the verbose flag. Okay, so here's the verbose thing. So here is curl saying we're going to try this IP address. All right, we've got some sort of header that's set there. Now it says we're connected, and here is our actual request. We're saying get whatever is at slash and use the HTTP 1.1 protocol to get it. So that is the line where we're doing a get request. All right. So when we say get, we're talking about HTTP verbs. From a user standpoint, when you use post or get on a form, what's the difference in terms of the behavior? If I search google.com, right? It's the most famous form on the web. And I do a search for web forms are awesome. What kind of request am I doing? Probably a lot of things. It's Google. But on the surface, what kind of request am I doing? Yeah. Why do we know it's probably a GET? Although this looks like it's some JavaScript thing, but ordinarily we'd say this is probably a GET request because the things that I submit to the form become a part of the URL. Okay? So when you're taking credit card information, do you want to use a GET method on your form?
No.
No. Why not?
URL.
Say it louder. Oh, it'll take it all right. It'll be glad to take your credit card information as a GET request. What else will it do? It'll show it in the URL, right? Like it becomes, that request becomes part of your URL. So we don't want to do a GET request with sensitive information. We don't want to do it with usernames. We don't want to do it with passwords. We usually only want to do GET requests with innocuous things like search results. The benefit of using a GET method with things like search boxes is what? Have you never emailed somebody a Google search result when they ask you a stupid question?
It's really long.
I have. What's that?
It's like a really long.
Well, that's the interesting thing. They've actually cleaned this up so it's really short now. Like they're actually changing it for social sharing, right? If you set a form as a GET request, you can bookmark that URL. You can share that URL with somebody. You can refresh the page if you're looking for news of like breaking events or something like that. So GET has its place. Most of the time, though, when we're collecting user data, we want to do a POST method. Who are the group of websites in the world that I hate? I love to complain about them because they use POST when they ought to use GET. Oop, not Southwest.com. Anybody ever looked up a flight status before? Right, here's our good HCI thing, right? Where do I go? I just want to check my flight status. Was it at the top? Did I miss it? Flight status, here we go. Buried conveniently here. Jumping right out at you behind the giant sale! $59, right? Flight status. And of course, I don't actually know a flight for today. But I'm willing to guess that if we clicked search, it would handle this as a POST request. Which means what? When I come back in a half an hour and I want to see if my flight is still on time, what do I get to do again? Fill out the form again, right? Whereas if they would just do, this isn't privileged information, right? We can do a search and find out like what are the flights in the air for Southwest. Like there's all kinds of different APIs that'll map that stuff. Okay, but they do this POST request thing. Whereas if we did it as a GET request, we'd just be able to hit refresh and find out what's going on with our flight status. Okay? All right. So usually when we're doing user information, we don't method POST. All right? And then what are the two, what are the two elements? Let's say we want to do an email sign up. What do we need? Input. Type what? In the old days, we would write input type text, right? But now we get email as our type, right? What happens when we do type email?
Doesn't it actually verify it's a valid email?
It does. Certain browsers may implement something like that, but what tends to happen, okay, so let's just do that input type email here. And we can just do name email. That'll be our variable name. And ID email. Okay. If I pull this open in my desktop browser, I got too many tabs here. I can just do a fresh page. Localhost 8080. Okay. It's just a plain old text box. What will happen on your phone, if it's a phone from a good home, is it will give you a keyboard that is suited for entering email addresses so that you don't have to pull up the second screen that has the @ sign at it, right? You'll have special keys that'll handle .com or .org if you press and hold that button. We'll start there next week because we're out of time. I'll post this with a live URL someplace so you can see it with your phone this weekend. Okay. Real quick, what's the other input? Nope. Input, type, not button. Submit. Okay. That's our hardwired submit button. All right. I'll see you guys next week. Have a good weekend.